What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. All right, y'all, I'm not going to lie, not a banner weekend to be a CSU fan. It was a tough one, starting with a really bad loss for CSU men's basketball Friday night at home against DU. Really the type of landmine type loss you were trying to avoid from a metric standpoint. I don't think it's a death sentence. I talked about that after the game. As brutal as it was, you are allowed to just say, man, that was a really disappointing showing. Makes things much more complicated. Certainly have room to grow, but it doesn't mean that this team has no chance of making the NCAA tournament or anything like that. I know that they won the Mountain West tournament last year, so it was different circumstances, but they were also 5-5 last year, so you still have an opportunity here to recover in the non-conference slate. We'll get into all of that. We'll talk a little bit of women's hoops at the end if we have some time as well. They're really impressing. If not, we'll talk about them more on Wednesday. Pac-12 champs got wins over Gonzaga and Oregon State on the road. Really impressive for Ryan Williams and company. We'll get into some coaching rumors, and obviously, we'll talk about the Darius Curry spitting incident, which was just a really bad moment for a young guy. It's indefensible, first of all. I also roll my eyes a little bit at the performative morality police online, seeing things like he should never play again, or it's representative of CSU as an entire institution. That's just ridiculous. I understand that's how the internet works. Everybody's got to get their take off. But it was a bad moment. It was a really bad moment. We'll talk about that in just a second. I did want to start the show, at least try to start the show with something fun. Had to stretch. Definitely had to stretch after last weekend. But on this day in CSU history, the Rams beat New Mexico 24-20 in the 2012 regular season finale. The Rams closed that year 2-1 over the final 3 weeks. If you remember back, they beat CU in the regular season opener against under Jim McElwain, then didn't win again, until November, but closed the year 2-1. Kind of gave some hope going into 2013, and that's obviously where things really started to turn the right direction. But a couple of fun moments that year, especially from Joe Hansley. He had a 2-touchdown day. I've had him on the show a couple of times. If you missed it, you should go back and listen to that. That might have been an audio-only podcast back in the day. I think we've actually had him on twice now. But he's told some fun stories from that 2012 season about being young and immature and honestly being in the doghouse with McElwain, but they were kind of limited at the skill position. And he forced his way onto the field with how he played. One of my favorite kind of random CSU Rams of all time. Had a really nice career, had a cup of coffee in the NFL with the Raiders, but kind of an underrated guy at CSU. Also on this day, November 24th, 1990, the Rams concluded the regular season with a comeback win at Hawaii. They were down 21-3, and that game ended up coming back 30-27. 3 touchdowns from running back Tony Copeland that evening. The Rams went 8-4 in the regular season, 6-1 in the WAC. They ultimately made the Freedom Bowl, where they beat Oregon. I believe that was the team's first bowl bid since 1948 at the time. So really a significant moment for CSU back in the day. Also on this day in history, the Rams got walked off at Hawaii in the 2023 regular season finale under Jay Norvell, and not a lot of good has happened since that night. So been tough. If you missed it over the weekend, Josh Allen kind of stirred some folks up. He was honored by Wyoming. They retired his number. Certainly well-deserved, had a great college career. That dude was kind of the bane of my existence when I was in college. But he ended his speech with it will always suck to be a CSU Ram, and predictably that stirred up some on the CSU side of things. Oh, rent free, making it about us. I honestly think it's what makes rivalries fun. We love the BVP stuff when he called CU the sorriest number 6 team that he'd ever seen. I think that's what it's all about. I do think it's a little bit funny that in the biggest moment of celebration for a truly great Wyoming poke, you're gonna go back to like very mediocre Bobo teams. That's kind of like the peak of your existence as a Wyoming supporter in the 21st century, even despite having Josh Allen never won more than like 7 games. But that said, that guy certainly kicked CSU's ass when he was there. I'll never forget that 2017 game. I thought it was funny. I thought it was a funny process. Aaron says, I have it on good authority. Josh was planning on leaving the game at halftime. Once he heard that he would get roasted for that, he changed his plans. Aaron is he's kind of an insider on the Wyo side of things. People don't realize that. He's a proud Ram fan, but got a lot of Wyoming ties. All right, let's get into it. Let's get into the Darius Curry stuff. Again, we kind of already set the scene for it, but if you missed it, they have suspended him. CSU released a statement yesterday from Tyson Summers, the interim head coach, as well as athletic director John Weber. I wrote, after the game that they were going to have to suspend him again. I don't think it's a situation where we have to use a bunch of hyperbole either way. There's no defending something like that. It's, first of all, just disgusting. It's a gross act to do to somebody. It's highly disrespectful, about as disrespectful of something as you can do to someone, honestly. And the fact that he went and ran behind the offensive line after the fact was not great for his image either. It's already hard to live an incident like that down, but if you are going to do something like that, you kind of have to step to it and be willing to fight, basically. It was very Carmelo Anthony-esque back in the day when he slapped Nate Robinson and then ran to the other side of the court. It's like, you're already slapping a dude half your size, now you're going to run away. That's not great. Now, Darius was going after a Boise linebacker, so he had the size disadvantage in the situation. I understand him not necessarily wanting that smoke, but again, after you do something like that, you kind of have to be ready to fight for those actions. Really, I mean, kudos to Boise for not just completely losing their mind in that scenario. The players on the field, at least the fans, that's a different conversation. We're getting a ton of commentary on how classless CSU is from Truck Stop University, which I don't know. I find it ironic. The same people that will claim that that's representative of an entire university will ignore. You remember the 2023 game when a dirty hit basically ended Kennedy McDowell's career? I Googled Boise State scandal and found like 4 instances in the last 3 years of players being arrested for violent acts. Now, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to turn around and be like, see, you're the dirty one, because again, one dumb thing isn't representative of an entire program or an entire school. It's dumb how we have to do this in the internet age, but it was also a really bad look for CSU. He absolutely should be suspended for the Air Force game. Probably should have been suspended in the moment. Kevin posted the video post-game. Based on what Summer said, it seemed like he didn't know it happened until after the fact. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But I do commend CSU for doing the right thing after the fact. Here is a statement. These actions are unacceptable. This is from John Weber. We are all regretful for what occurred last night, and on behalf of everyone at Colorado State, I want to apologize to the Boise State football student athletes, Director of Athletics Jeremiah Dickey, Coach Danielson, and the entire Boise State football program. Not a banner weekend for CSU on top of getting rolled and losing by 4 scores for like the 4th straight time in Boise. You find a way to embarrass yourselves even more with this incident again. I mean, there's no defending it. To the people with some of the performative outrage, I will say this is something that happens on the football field more commonly than you would think. Maybe it'll happen less so in the future now that we have all these cameras and we're seeing people get caught in 4K. You know, Jordan Davis on the Eagles like a month ago got in trouble for a similar instance. What was it? LeGarrette Blount back in the day? Isn't that what caused the fight with Oregon and Boise? You know, shoot, that was probably like 06, 07 at this point. It's been a really long time. It's not the first time we've seen it. It won't be the last time it happens. It's always something that needs to be punished. And like again, like there's no accepting it, but really it's gross is what it is more than anything. Curry did release an apology statement, as did offensive lineman Liam Wertman, who has also been suspended, although Wertman's statement was a little bit different. It was kind of, I'm proud to be a Ram. I don't really know why I'm being suspended is kind of the vibe we got from him. I didn't see why he was suspended either. I don't know if he spit on someone as well, if there was a separate incident, what kind of went into all of that. But kudos to CSU for doing the right thing, despite the fact that it's going to put this offense in an even tighter spot against Air Force. And it is a shame in a lot of ways, because this was an opportunity for a young quarterback to gain valuable experience, whether that would be for his future at CSU or a different institution. I've been pretty open going back to September now that I don't feel that the 2026 starting quarterback is likely in the building right now, or at least I don't think it probably should be. I would like to see some of these guys stick around and compete. I think that would be ideal. But I mean, based on what we've seen to this point, Brousseau is just far too limited physically. I mean, you're not going to be able to strike enough fear into the heart of defenses with him out there. He was put in an impossible position and performed admirably considering the circumstances. If he is able to go on Friday after everything this team's been through, after everything he's been through, I would again just add the fact that while I've been critical of his play, I don't think it's his fault that the offense has struggled or anything like that. And it really has been impossible. Curry, you know, he flashes some stuff. They certainly move the ball with more consistency. I think he's done a good job of getting some of the other receivers involved that just weren't in the picture at all when Brousseau was running things. You know, Levon Brown is a good instant or a good example. Another instance is probably Tommy Maher. You know, I feel like we've seen those guys be more of a factor. He's also been way too turnover prone. You know, at this point, he's got 7 interceptions in less than 110 pass attempts, you know, in like a 300 attempt season. That's on pace for a 21 interception year. That's too many turnovers. And with a young guy playing behind a decimated offensive line and with a receiving core that just hasn't been good, I understand that some of that is him trying to create something out of nothing, trying to find a spark for an offense, which has just been anemic for large portions of the season. But the bottom line is that quarterback play has just not been good enough. And that's not just an issue with this year. Like, there's a lot of things that we can talk about this year that have been unique to the struggles of the 2025 team. But subpar quarterback play has been one of the biggest reasons that the Rams have not had consistent success. Really, you got to go back to Nick Stevens was probably the last time that CSU had above average quarterback play, and he was limited physically, but he executed that offense really well. Couldn't really throw a deep ball, didn't have a great arm, but the intermediate stuff, he was masterful. And there were stretches, especially in the second half of 2016. I actually think the best stretch of his career was kind of late in that 2016 season. And we saw some instances of it early in 2017 as well. He was awesome, but you haven't had elite quarterback play since Grayson in 2014. Really, he's the only example of it in the last 20 years. And it's like the second half of the 2013 season. And then 2014, I'll add the caveat that had Colin Hill been healthy, I think at very worst, he would have gone into the above average category, if not potentially flirted with the elite side of things. I just think he was really intelligent and physically, he certainly had all the tools, you know, the build, the arm strength, could hit any throw anywhere on the field, just unfortunately couldn't stay healthy. But they have got to figure out this quarterback position regardless of who the next hire is, because there's no chance of finding any type of sustained success if they're unable to do so. So Aaron in the Twitter chat says Air Force only 1.5 point favorite. Damn, they must suck. They do. They are genuinely awful. The entire Front Range is down bad right now across the board. CSU, Wyoming, Air Force. The Buffs continue to piss games away as well. I mean, it's been spectacularly catastrophic for all of these teams. UNC has been bad since having a nice stretch early on in the year. It's been bad, but it's been real bad in Fort Collins. So bad that I think it's arguably been the worst season of the 21st century. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Keep the comments rolling. If you're tuned in live on YouTube, hit us with the thumbs up. If you wouldn't mind giving us a 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your podcasts, I certainly would appreciate it. We'll keep this rolling. We still got plenty to talk about. Thanks for rocking with us live on a Monday. All right, I want to talk to you guys about Brunt's best-selling Marin work boots. They are built for the toughest job sites. They're completely waterproof, so you can trust them in any environment, whether it's rain, mud, standing water. They are going to help your feet stay dry. From oily workshop floors to muddy farm fields and anywhere in between, the Marin's 6-inch soft toe is built for workers across a variety of trades. They've got some of the best boots on the planet, and what's awesome is if you bought, something for work back in the day, it meant you were likely sacrificing comfort, probably style as well. That's just not the case with Brunt. Founder Eric Gerard grew up blue collar. He started Brunt Workwear because his friends in the trades kept telling him about how so many brands had basically sold out to be fashion brands. They weren't making practical workwear anymore. Brunt thought that was BS. With temps dropping and the holidays coming up, it's time to treat yourself or the hardworking man in your life to real comfort. Skip the throwaway gifts. Get him something built to last. That's Brunt Workwear. Our listeners get $10 off their entire order with the code DNVR at checkout. That's bruntworkwear.com. Use that code DNVR. Order today and let them know you heard it here on the show. Hey, Colorado. The holiday season is coming up. There's no better place to stock up for the sports fans in your life than Dick's Sporting Goods. Check out your local Dick's Sporting Goods for all the hottest apparel. There's DNVR gear in most local Dick's at this point. Most local Dick's Sporting Goods at this point. Top brands like Nike, Adidas Originals, Hoka, DNVR, and more. Plus, score the latest equipment for baseball, football, soccer, basketball, golf, all your tailgating essentials. If you find a lower price, they'll match it with the best price guarantee. Get your gear fast with free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from Dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. I don't want to hear it in the Toyota chat, y'all. We're just going to roll past that one. All right, let's get into some takeaways from that Boise State game Saturday night. There's not a ton to hit on. It's unique to this game. Like, the struggles of the offense are what they are at this point. We kind of get what it is, but we'll talk about the game a little bit. Javion Kennard's overturned touchdown. I know the game was over in the fourth quarter. It's not like it would have made a difference at that point, but seeing him lose that 91-yard touchdown for taunting was one of the softest calls that I've ever seen. I mean, he did technically high step a little bit, but it certainly was not traumatic. It was more just kind of powering down, in my opinion. When you're running that hard, you slow down. I don't know. He sauntered in there. Like, there was certainly some showboating element to it, but if you score a 91-yard touchdown, you should get an opportunity to have a little bit of fun. It's been a brutal season. I guess I don't understand that call in that scenario. It felt highly unnecessary. Really wanted to shut the game off at that point. It was already a tough watch, and then just seeing that had me fuming a little bit. Like, of course they're going to get that call in that scenario, but the real reason the Rams lost this game, outside of the turnover margin, you forced the one fumble, but -3 overall in turnover margin in this game is just the fact that the offense continues to be lifeless for long stretches of time. 2 more scoreless quarters in this game. That's now 23 scoreless quarters on the season. I mean, that's almost 6 full games. Half of your season you have been held scoreless at this point. It's going to be tough to win with any type of consistency if your offense is that anemic. And I know they've had multiple play callers, multiple quarterbacks. I understand the injuries and the trenches and the tight end position and everything that's factored into that. But I don't know. At some point, like, you're just kind of broken fundamentally if you are struggling to score that frequently. Like it's just been insane to think about the fact that you're one scoreless quarter away from being shut out for half your season. Like that's just insane to even think about. I don't want to like beat a dead horse at this point. You know, I feel bad for the kids that are out on the field right now, to those that have chosen to stick around, especially the talented guys that are going to have options in the future. I tip my cap to you, because there are others who have chosen to, and I understand the business element and all of this, and why certain guys have just decided it's not worth it for them at this point. It's a completely lost season. I wrote that at this point. I think this is rock bottom for CSU. I mean, they are likely going to lose to Air Force. Anything can happen. Again, that Falcons team is genuinely bad, so winning it wouldn't be shocking, although I don't like the chances without Darius Curry. And again, that's where choosing to have integrity in this moment is not the easy thing to do, because it hurts your chance to win a rivalry game, to win a trophy game. Probably the last time you're going to play Air Force anytime in the near future. You could be prideful as an institution and say that Curry gives us the best chance to move the ball. It was a dumb incident, but hey, we're going to play him, or we were going to suspend him a quarter or something like that. No, he's not going to play in this game. I think if the Rams lose this game and fall to 2-10, or even if they finish 3-9, what does it really matter at this point? I really genuinely believe that this has been the toughest season to stomach for the CSU fan base in my entire life. And that's saying something, because there have been some downright horrible teams in my life. But I was going through, and I think it's either the last 2 years of the Fairchild era, those were pretty hopeless, I won't lie, or it's this season. But I think the difference is there were no expectations whatsoever by the end of the Fairchild era. That was as irrelevant that college football in this state has ever been. CU was awful. CSU was awful. Just nobody cared. I mean, that's when we saw the showdown attendance basically dip in half. Like it just was not, it was not a thing. And honestly, like that's how I started to get more into college basketball at the time, was you started to see that program rise under Tim Miles, and it was so hopeless on the football side of things. I really leaned into hoops and like found a lot of fun in that, and probably kept my passion for CSU roaring because of that, because without it, there really wasn't a whole lot to feel good about at that time. But the difference is back then, you're still playing in Hughes. From in an investment standpoint, the fact that the program has regressed this far to where you're in the conversation with the 2010 and 2011 teams for the worst of the 21st century, that shouldn't be possible. And the fact that we're going to have to see this program do a total reset for now the fourth time in like less than 15 years is just absurd, based on everything that we have pumped into this program, building the stadium, you know, investment in staff resources, and even like small things like uniforms and all that have come so far since, you know, late in the Fairchild era. Everything else is in place. This team just continually finds ways to top the last year's, you know, level of underperformance that didn't come out great. You know what I mean? Like they just, every year they find a way to disappoint us even more. That was a better way to phrase it. And when I go through the years, again, not a whole lot redeeming about the end of the Fairchild era, but like even in 2022, that was also a pretty hopeless season, but you still had hard eyes for a first-year coach at that point, and you kind of gave Norvell some slack given the transfer situation. Nobody went into that year with real expectations like they did this season. 2021, they still won homecoming. 2020, they still won the border war. 2018, that team was awful. They beat Arkansas. The 2012 team under McElwain, they beat CU. I mean, in 2009, they beat CU as well. So again, I think it comes down to this year, or 2010 or 2011, and the difference is it hurts more this time around because there's actual expectations. The fan base has committed. We've had some of the biggest home crowds in program history over the last couple of years. And to see this team very likely finish 2-10, it's just, it's tough to fathom. It's tough to comprehend given everything that's changed, and yet here we are, basically in the exact same spot that we were in 15 or so years ago. I still feel like Adazio's behavior away from the program, the stuff with the janitor and like getting investigated for misconduct before ever even coaching a game, like I think that was probably a worse look for CSU as an academic institution, but competitively this year is as rough as it gets. And like you got to go back to the dog days of Fairchild, the 80s, is really bad in the 80s and at times in the 70s. But, back then CSU wasn't committed to winning. They weren't spending the way that they do today. And despite the fact that they continue to do everything right from a commitment to athletic standpoint, the results just have not been there. And the Rams better figure it out. I've said a couple of times now that this is probably the most important hire that CSU athletics has ever had. Oregon State isn't going to be down forever. Texas State's struggling this year. I do wonder what Texas State is ultimately going to be in the Pac-12, but I mean, you're in a position of potentially being the runt in this new conference if you can't get it right with this hire. Oregon State's not going to be down forever. Washington State, we'll see. But I mean, Boise's going to be Boise. San Diego State tends to be more competitive than not over the last 20 years. Fresno, despite everything, it feels like they're going to win 7 to 10 games almost every year, just no matter what. The Rams have got to fit Utah State. They continue to sustain it despite losing coaches. Like what Utah State's been able to do, both from a football and a basketball standpoint over the last 5 years, has been pretty remarkable considering the coach and roster turnover that they've had to deal with. I guess if you're looking for a silver lining is that there is proof of concept there. Teams like Utah State, you see what UNLV's been able to do with Dan Mullen this year, what New Mexico's doing with Jason Eck. You can turn the corner faster than you've ever been able to thanks to the portal. The double-edged sword of it all is that while you can maybe hit the ground running faster than you could in the past, it's never been harder to sustain things, because the minute you show something, then all of a sudden you have these bigger schools trying to poach your talent. So it's going to be an uphill battle regardless of whoever comes in here, of not only getting this thing rolling but being able to sustain it as well. You're always going to have to deal with the portal. You're always going to have to deal with having a tighter checkbook than some of those bigger programs out there. But there's no excuses, and you got to find a way to get this thing going here, because the fact that they are this bad in the year 2025 is just insane. And I hate to say it, but it almost gives validity to some of the dinguses in the Save Our Stadium crowd. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, don't get me wrong. Building the on-campus stadium was objectively a phenomenal decision for the university. What it's done from a visibility standpoint and drawing alumni back to campus on game day versus what it was back in the day, where if you're coming from the metro area or something like that, you'd come in, go to the game, and you'd never even see the CSU campus. And football is supposed to be, the greatest advertisement, the selling point, the front porch for it, if you will. Building the stadium, absolutely the right decision. It's crazy it hasn't led to basically any more success whatsoever. And in fact, it's regressed from, like the end of the McElwain era, even early on in the Bobo era. It's been basically nothing but downhill. And for this year to be as bad as it's been, and for me to be willing to say that, and I try not to be the hot take guy that comes out and says, a bunch of hyperbolic stuff. And I don't know. I think it's firmly in the conversation. I guess I'll say that. Dustin says, any rumors on Kiffin to CSU? We actually are going to talk about Lane Kiffin a little bit and how he is holding up all of college football right now. Him and super agent Jimmy Sexton, who is just using all of his own clients to leverage, more and more for all the other guys. It's pretty impressive to watch. It's also super annoying that it's drawn out this long. Wherever Lane ends up, it's going to have a massive domino effect, because Ole Miss might be looking to replace him. Or if not, Florida and LSU are still looking to get their guys. And depending on who they poach from, then there's more openings there. And now we saw Cal open up. I mean, CSU does have an incentive here if they can. That there's obviously a big element in all this is if they're able to or not. but they have a big incentive to get a deal done sooner than later, because I think this coaching carousel, which is already wild, is only going to get crazier from here. All right, let's take a quick breather. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, and then we'll keep this rolling. Whether you need snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, Branded Bills has you covered with performance and style. If you're looking for gear to make your brand stand apart, look no further than Branded Bills. They have you covered with some of the best custom headwear. Start your order. Their dedicated team will help you with the exact custom apparel you need. If you look in the DNVR locker, we've got DNVR hats that are made through Branded Bills. They're really cool. We've got ALLCITY network hats as well. They've got a partnership with Colorado State as part of the on-campus collection. I've got 3 different hats from that on-campus collection. Love them. Wear them all the time. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. With the holiday season coming up, no better time than to check out our friends at Branded Bills, presenting partner, the DNVR Rams podcast. All right. I also encourage you to choose chill. The holidays can be tiring. I'm already trying to set a schedule that's borderline impossible to satisfy everyone. I want to see my side of the family and the fiance side of the family, and I've got football and basketball and hockey now, which is a nice little fun wrinkle in all of this. So it's always been a chaotic week with the MTs and then football wrapping up the season. Now you throw in a couple Avs games. It's a lot. It's a lot to balance. And to be honest, it can make me pretty unchill at times just because I'm exhausted. So thankful to do what I do. But in those moments of high stress or exhaustion, I got to remind myself, get outside, take some deep breaths, walk the dog, put yourself in a chill state of mind, then come back, put the game on. Now I'm feeling good again. Crack open that ice cold Coors Light, mountain cold refreshment. It's cold lagered, cold filtered, and cold packaged for a smooth finish. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado beer. All right, y'all. Couple of final takeaways from the Boise State game. I got a little sidetracked on my tangent about how down bad we are at the moment. I've mentioned 23 scoreless quarters on the year. That's almost half the season. Turnovers continue to be an issue. I do commend the CSU defense for the amount of turnovers they have forced in the couple of weeks, though, at least giving you a puncher's chance of being competitive. Did a decent job of avoiding the explosives. You'll hope to see that be a theme against Air Force, who feels like they're good for a 40-yard touchdown pass against you once or twice every single time you play. But Boise just drove at will. 533 yards of total offense, 52 rushing attempts for 279 yards. That's 5.4 yards a pop. They went 7 for 7 in the red zone. That's the story of this one. The Rams did create some yards after the catch, 202 yards after the catch. I think that was probably the most encouraging element of it all. Not a lot to feel good about with CSU football right now. And with that in mind, let's talk about the power ranking. We'll have, I guess, one more after this, but it's been as weird of a year in the Mountain West as I can recall. I don't think there's really a great team in the conference this season. I think there's teams who have decent ceilings but are erratic. We've got some people asking in the Toyota chat about any rumors to Tim Polasek leaving for CSU. I can't confirm or deny that. I would assume that he would firmly be in the mix for that gig. We'll do the power ranking in a sec. Let's just talk about this. Probably more relevant and interesting to all of you guys anyways. I think if you are going to go with one of those top level FCS guys, it's been reported that Brent Vigen was spotted at the Portland airport, so potentially in the mix at Oregon State. But if you are going to go with one of the guys who are in those top FCS programs, Montana State, North Dakota State, you're probably getting the deal done this week, and it will probably heat up in the next 48 to 72 hours, I would say, because they're on a bye. They have time to, get a deal done, check out the campus, all that, meet the team, and then still go back and coach in the playoff. Tim Polasek would be on my short list of top realistic candidates. I think you could do far worse than him. I think he's a guy that has been able to sustain a lot of success despite, the portal and everything else. The fact that they're still chugging along the way that they have has been great. I think the success against rivals is really encouraging for both him and Vigen. You look at North Dakota State, they've still run the table to this point, but Montana State coming off of a big win over previously undefeated Montana. I think that was on the road too, although I might be mixing that up. I mean, I think those guys make a lot of sense just with the profile of having won at places that have less to offer than some of the bigger schools. Imagine what they could do with more to offer. And then also, both those guys have pretty deep recruiting ties in the state of Colorado, which is a selling point as well. Now, I think at times the local recruiting stuff gets complicated. We are seeing a lot of offers go out to local prospects in this 2026 cycle. Makes sense. You're going to need bodies after you lose, quite a few guys to the portal. But I think he is on the short list of realistic targets for CSU is where I'm at with that one. If I have anything that I can report with any type of confidence, I'll certainly put it out there. Like I was the one that broke, Norvell's dismissal and Farouk being hired. I do have some sources, but I've said this more than once now. This has been a tighter sealed coaching search than any of the previous ones. And I think that's a testament to the people working under John Weber and the respect that they have for him. It was a leaky faucet there for a couple years. There was a lot of info coming out pretty willy-nilly, and that's not necessarily good for the state of the athletic program. It's good for people like me who are in the business of having information and creating content. But I have been impressed with how tight a lot of this information has been kept in, even on a national level. Like there haven't been a lot of rumors that have come out other than the obvious stuff that's straight out of agents' mouths. Somebody says here, would a new hire be announced before the year ends? Yeah, I think the new hire will certainly be announced before Christmas. I mean, I think we'll hear it in the next 7 to 10 days. I mean, like ideally you'd be introducing the next coach like next Monday or something, but when exactly it's going to go down could be any moment. Like I just don't want to act like I know more than I do at this point and fill your guys' heads with a bunch of BS information, which there are a lot of radio hosts, writers, content creators that do stuff like that. I always try and be as transparent as I can about what is sourced information, what is just speculation on my part, what's an educated guess, all of that. And as far as Polasek being in the running at CSU goes, that would be an educated guess. But I do think that it's becoming more and more likely that it's a coach like that, and maybe less likely that it's someone, say, like Colin Klein. Again, could be dead wrong. I've heard there's quite a bit of smoke with him to Oklahoma State, but we shall see. It does feel like the momentum has cooled nationally for some of the UCLA guys, both Neuheisel and Tim Skipper. Obviously, UCLA has kind of come back to reality after being a fun story there. I have a personal relationship with Skip, and I think CSU could probably land somebody who's more qualified for the gig, I guess is where I'm at. If I'm being completely transparent, I think he deserves. I think he has earned an opportunity at this point to be a head coach, and I hope someone does hire him. I just think with the importance of this hire, you need somebody who's been there, done that before. And the fact that he's not even really been an OC, I don't know. That's a tough sell to the masses, I guess, is where I'm at with that. But Cal being open is another wrinkle in all of this. This is going to really be one of the most chaotic coaching cycles that we've ever seen. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with the rumor mill. I do think once Lane Kiffin finally makes his decision, we're going to see a lot of these dominoes start falling across the board with some of these other programs. Then obviously they open up things. But I think Lane Kiffin is really mucking things up across the board, him and super agent Jimmy Sexton. Good question, actually, in the Toyota chat here. Is the FCS playoff schedule a detriment to hiring an FCS candidate? Would CSU ask them to leave early rather than wait through the end of December? I think you have to give a coach an opportunity to finish out what he started if they have a chance to play for a national championship. If you remember back in the day, that's what happened with McElwain, still let him Sugar Bowl or whatever it was. It's not the most ideal scenario. I'll admit that, but I think you have to give a coach a chance to finish what he started. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. I mean, you could technically pressure the guy and say, hey, like it's now or never. But I have a hard time seeing coaches being willing to walk away from something like that, even for a substantial raise. But it is a hurdle, especially when it comes to recruiting. The nice thing now is that you at least technically have a player personnel staff. You have a GM. I'm still not entirely sure how that's going to play out moving forward with, the new coach. Does the GM stick around? Alex Collins, I'm not sure. But I mean, it does help you at least at this transition stage. I don't think anybody expects your first recruiting class to be the one that is dominant, but I mean, you are going to have to hit in the portal. So it is a factor in all of this for sure. But I mean, the FCS playoff will be over a little bit sooner than somebody who's making a run through the entire, FBS playoff too, like Colin Klein potentially. Although I don't know if A&M is a legit national title contender or not. But yeah, it's a factor in all this, getting a little going in circles at this point. Let's talk about the Mountain West Power Ranking. If you've got more questions, comments, etc., keep them coming. We are going to talk some hoops here, but we can talk more football at the end. I love how active it is in the Toyota chat this morning. Really appreciate you guys rocking with us on a Monday morning, despite everything. I know the CSU football presser is going right now. I have some meetings this afternoon, so I had to miss that one, unfortunately. Also, I mean, outside of like hearing what they have to say about Curry, I don't think there's that much interesting that's going to come out of it. That said, let's get into the power ranking. Not a great spot if you're CSU. I think we got to put them in 12. Nevada's won back-to-back weeks. You can't keep them in the 12th spot. CSU getting embarrassed, haven't won since they let go of Norvell. Between that and the bad PR that comes along with the spitting incident, I think CSU has to be 12. I think we are truly at rock bottom right now. We're in the 12th spot. I think it's hard to argue anybody else. I've got San Jose State at 11, Wyoming 10. I think really 11 through 8 are pretty interchangeable, but we'll go San Jose State 11. Got thumped by San Diego State. They've really been struggling here after upsetting Hawaii a couple weeks back. I've got Wyoming at 10, who blew a winnable game against Nevada with Josh Allen in the building. Their late game execution was rough. They had a player, there's like 11 seconds left, and instead of handing the ball to the official, they have no timeouts. They're in the red zone, but instead of handing the ball to the official, he tosses it. The ref doesn't catch it. They aren't able to get a playoff in time because they weren't able to get the ball spotted. Really bad execution. Not a great example of the quality of coaching happening in Laramie. But what does that say about CSU? That awful team still thumped us 28-0. Again, the Rams deserve the bottom spot. I've got Nevada at 9 on the rise. The fact that they are out of the 10, 11, 12 area is pretty incredible. Happy for them, although Nevada fans do not love me very much. I've got Air Force at 8 and Fresno State at 7. Air Force is who they are at this point. Fresno is trending the wrong direction. Utah State 6, Boise State 5. Boise, I think, maybe gets back to that 4-3 range depending on what happens next week. But I've got Hawaii at 4, really disappointing showing against UNLV. Got their ass kicked. Still struggling to win on the road, and until they're able to do so, it's tough to take that program seriously. I've got San Diego State 2. I still think they're the most complete team in the league, but with the quarterback situation, I think you have to put UNLV at 1. And if you've listened to the show all year, you know that that's a tough one for me to stomach. I've got to take my medicine on this one. I have been very out on UNLV going all the way back to the summer. I still think that they had some very fraudulent, fluky wins early on in the season, but they are playing the best football in the league right now. And for that team to win double-digit games is pretty impressive coaching from Dan Mullen. So I will eat crow on that. UNLV far better than I would have anticipated. I think they have improved some things defensively. They're not quite as leaky there, which makes me think they're a little bit more valid than early on in the season. But everybody loves to take a victory lap when they get one right. I was just wrong. I was wrong about UNLV's ceiling this year, and I'll own that. I feel like I was pretty spot on with some of them, pretty off on a few others, definitely off on CSU, as we all were. But that's where we're at with the power ranking. Let's talk some hoops before we get out of here. I know that Friday night was brutal. Losing to a team ranked in the 300s is really going to hurt the metrics. There's a lot of work you're going to have to do to be able to overcome this. That said, we saw CSU lose to UC Riverside a couple months later. They were seconds away from playing from the Sweet 16. Who you are in November doesn't define who you are in February and March. And, from the other side of things, a couple years ago, this team was top 15 in the country in November, and then basically we're a little above 500 for a long stretch of conference play. So, as tough as this was to stomach, I think at times we're able to accept a team more when they struggle right off the bat and then they gradually improve than we are with a team who shows it as potential right out of the gate, but then, has some dips. And I think realistically, we knew there were going to be some highs and lows for a team with this many new pieces. Now, losing at home to DU, that's not acceptable. That's not something that you can accept if you want to be considered, a San Diego State-esque program. Although they lost at home to Troy, it's been a bad stretch for the entire conference as a whole this November. But you've got to put it behind you, because you now have the most important stretch of the non-conference coming up. If you can beat a quality Virginia Tech team and it's a winnable game, you're probably going to get St. Mary's or worst case, Wichita State. Those are huge for your metrics. And then you've got CU at home on the 6th. So there's an opportunity here to put some meat on the bones, to strengthen your resume, to kind of put this one past you. I also think DU is better than maybe their numbers show right now. Pretty solid guard play from them. I was impressed with what they were able to do from a shot making perspective. I think that CSU defensively was not good. It was as bad defensively as we've seen from this team since early on in the Medved era, where they basically had no interest in playing defense whatsoever. Offense is rarely going to be a consistent struggle for this team, although credit DU with what they were able to do. I think they switched some things 1 through 5 that caught CSU for a loop. Ali talked about that post game. I did think the Rams did a good job of adjusting in the second half and feeding the post, because Jorgensen, 29 points in this one, another double-double from Kerry Booth. Those guys, DU couldn't guard them. And once CSU figured that out, they did a good job of just feeding that repeatedly and drawing fouls and hitting their free throws, which they didn't do in the first half, which was a big factor in all of this as well. But the Rams, if they are going to do anything at all this year, they have got to improve so much on the defensive side. John in the Twitter chat says, given the way CSU's played against DU and Moby the past 3 years, why not just play at DU, play in Magnus, fill it with Denver Rams, and save us a drive once a season? I don't hate the logic behind it. I mean, if you're playing, it's never going to be like a true hostile road setting. If you struggle with them, it hurts you a little less metrically being on the road than being at home. So, I mean, there's some logic to that. I think the counter is that if you're a team like CSU, you're just trying to play as many home games as you possibly can. You want the revenue from that, obviously, but I do think that playing a game in Denver could be fun. And honestly, if anybody would be open to something as seemingly sensible as that for the fan base, I think a coach like Ali Farouk-Manesh would be into that. Some coaches have too big of egos for that. Oh, we're not playing in their gym. You have to come here. I could see Ali being willing to go to DU or like Greeley every now and then. Greeley is a much tougher environment, but that's an interesting thought. And I'll ask the coaches what their thoughts are on it and see if maybe that's something that might happen down the line. Yeah. Bemba looks super rusty on Friday, Dustin says in the Toyota chat. I agree with you. It's going to be the case when you miss 4 games or whatever it was. I wish he could have gotten out on the floor in the second half. I should have asked about that post game. Didn't think about it until after the fact. I understood why they didn't. You're trying to ease him into things. Also, when he was 1 of 6 at the free throw line, it's tough to play him. They need Bemba for the physicality he brings and potentially for what he can do for you defensively. You know, I wrote about it. I've talked about it multiple times on this show. Defense is going to be what dictates this team's ceiling. There'll be off nights offensively. This wasn't a banner night offensively. Again, I expect to see more teams switch 1 through 5 like DU did, because I think this was probably the first game we felt not having an experienced offensive facilitator out there. You know, last year you really didn't have a true point guard. Kyan played the point and he could facilitate some things for you, but Neek facilitated a lot of stuff in the crunch time for the team. But between those two, it was enough to get by, and Jalen could do some things in a pinch. You had Isaiah Stevens to lean on before that. You had Roddy, you know, like you always had somebody who was going to create a high quality look either for himself or somebody else on the floor in those spots. I think that Rechsteiner naturally is probably more of a 2 guard. I do wonder if because of that we see more and more JoJo and that becomes more of a 50-50 proposition, especially if JoJo can make a leap offensively. He's got a deep bag, and I think he's going to be a 3-level scorer, but it's just harder. You have to adjust to scoring at this level from the high school level. There's always kind of an adjustment period. If you remember back, freshman Roddy and freshman Zay didn't look like, you know, what they did a couple years after that. But I think in this game, especially in that first half, you felt the ball get really stagnant, and they weren't moving as well. I do think CSU needs to play with more pace. I was on Steve Ivy's show this morning. That's something he and I are in agreement on. You need to play with more pace, try and get more possessions. It's been really kind of slow, grinded out, half-court type games. And for a team that's sharing the ball well, that's fine. But in a matchup like this, where the defense is able to muck it up and you're not able to get the same looks with consistency from along the perimeter, you need somebody who's going to be able to drive and initiate some things. And to me, I think JoJo is probably the most natural facilitator in that element. I do think that, like, it was maybe the shot making was so good out of the gate that I was probably overlooking some of the defensive deficiencies. I knew they needed to improve, and we talked about it basically every post-game show of, yeah, you know, like some stretches there where they need to be better. But I just feel like the pressure, the intensity isn't there. I don't know if it's necessarily a lack of ability. I don't think that Rechsteiner or Pasquarelli are going to be phenomenal defenders. They were brought here to be bucket getters, and those guys can score. I think Pasquarelli is probably your best shot creator for himself, at least at the moment. But I think that with some of the defensive struggles we're seeing, I do think it leads to opportunities for people like JoJo McIver and Jace Butler to play more minutes for you. And then, you know, Kerry Booth as well. Those are your 3 best on-ball defenders. The Rams have got to put more pressure along the perimeter. That's another thing that Steve brought up with me this morning that I thought was really astute. When you watch opposing offenses right now, they're really able to set up in their offense because we're not hounding anybody. I mean, guys are able to go inside the arc until they're really facing any type of pressure. And I'm not saying you got to go full court press or something like that, although maybe some small instances of that could be good from a change of pace. But they've got to work far harder to fight around some of those screens, to contest some of these looks. Like, credit to you. In the second half, especially, there were 2 or 3 instances of a guy just making a good play, because I thought the defensive intensity was better in the second half. But in the first half, it was just so lackadaisical. And it was like that in the second half against Loyola. I thought they were pretty good in the first half. So basically 2 of the last 4 halves of basketball you've played unacceptable defense. And that's something that is going to have to change if this team is going to have an opportunity. Like, I think they're going to win 20 games either way, but it's the difference between being a potential at-large candidate and being a team that, you know, punches up here and there, but more or less is on the outside looking in. And I do think this team is good enough to go to the tournament if they can put it together. They do need Bemba to be a lot better than he was in this one. I think continuing to lean on Jorgensen offensively is going to be big for CSU. I mean, 29 points, 7 of 11 from the floor. He was 12 of 14 at the line, 3 of 4 from deep, really hit some big threes, some really loud shots that he took pretty confidently. Kerry Booth had 18 points, 10 of 10 at the line. So, I mean, those guys, you shouldn't be losing when you're getting 48 out of those two and 22 of 24 at the free throw line on top of 16 rebounds. Again, another double-double for Booth. He had 10. Jorgensen had 6. The assist numbers weren't great. Pasquarelli led the team with 4. CSU as a whole only had 11, but some of that shot making, also some of that had to do with the fact that the Rams were just living at the free throw line. I mean, this game had no flow in the second half, turned into a total ref show both ways. 35 of 44 at the line, though, isn't going to get it done. You love that they had 44 free throw attempts. You hate that they shot 79.5% in a game that you lose by 2. You know, that you can use all the cliches, you know, it's game inches and all that. Well, when you don't make your free throws in a tight game, especially when DU's playing out of their mind, and credit them again for coming into Moby, they weren't going to be scared. You knew they weren't going to. I mean, they'd already played at Seattle and Washington. We talked about that going in. You know, they weren't going to be fazed by the environment. They've got to be more consistent. That's where I'm at with this team right now. I want to see them improve. We'll talk about that Wednesday, kind of what we want to see in the MTE. But I wouldn't panic. I guess that's where I'm at with this team. I'd like to see more on-ball pressure. I'd like to see CSU find more of a consistent post presence. I think the decision and the shots that CSU is taking as a whole are good, and the metrics support that. You know, one of the more efficient offenses in the entire country, but this next stretch is key, and they've got to be far better defensively. They've got to be better on the glass. The final numbers weren't that bad. Actually, the Rams were plus 11 on the glass, but you give up 9 offensive rebounds, which resulted in 10 second chance points. So, I mean, between that and the fact that, you know, you missed 9 free throws, that's a 19-point swing if you just rebound better and free throw and hit your free throws with a little bit more consistency. So there's no reason to panic. You know, you'd rather have a bad loss in November than February or March, but this is one that you're going to feel if you are in the conversation, you know, when you're for those like last 10 at-large type bids. These are the type of games that can really hurt you. It sucks that, you know, it was a cool glass of water on what was a really red-hot start, but I also think reasonably and realistically, we always kind of knew there were going to be some highs and lows, and you were kind of hoping for a little less drasticness with that. You know, the peaks and valleys being a little bit more in the middle would be nice. But this team has offensive potential. They've got experience. The coaching staff is great. I don't expect them to hang their heads too long and for this to be something that compounds and kills the season or anything like that. Next stretch is key. You know, you've got to have some success here in the MTE, and then obviously you got to win at home against CU if you do want to be an at-large team outside of doing something absurd, you know, in the league slate and going like 18-2 or something like that, which you probably aren't going to do because there's a lot of really tough road games in the Mountain West, as many tough, true road environments as you'll face in most leagues. You know, I know the top end schools in the Big 12, the ACC, there's some pretty crazy environments, but it's not easy to win in the pit. It's not easy to go to Laramie or Viejas or even Reno and Moby, you know, and in Utah State. Like, you got to play at elevation a lot. You got to play at places that have ruckus student crowds in New Mexico and San Diego State and Utah State, and CSU students have been great now for really a half decade. It's going to be a tough, you know, even with the league being down, it's still going to be tough at times, especially for a team that doesn't have like a bona fide star, an established point guard. There's still room for this team to grow, and there's still roles that are going to be carved out over the course of the season. Let's see how it all plays out, and then we will give our thoughts accordingly. I love that Nate Clifford was there. Love being able to catch up with him post game. It's just cool to see how much love he shows the CSU community. You know, he's been around a ton since the end of last season. You know, was here a couple times over the summer. Has already been back multiple times this fall. It's a small thing. I love that he was repping CSU gear. You know, so often like NBA, NFL guys, when they come back, they're on the sideline, they're all swagged out. And I get it. If I had that kind of money, I probably would too. But it was just like a really small thing that made me happy to be like, look at Neek, man. He's here and he's just repping the Rams, just rocking a CSU shirt. I think that's pretty cool. Also think it was pretty cool that well over 40 minutes after the game, Neek's still in the gym, signing autographs, taking pictures with every kid that asked him. I mean, it just speaks to the type of person that he is. Just such a cool dude. It's been so cool to see these guys live out their dreams, and it makes me feel grateful that I got to be just a small part of it, like getting to see the journey and write about him and hype him up and everything. I'm not the reason he got there, but I like that I got to tell people his story, and I'll always be thankful for that. And I got to see his dad, and that was cool. It's always really cool, and it's been fun because not only have the stars at CSU been great, they've come from great families. Isaiah Stevens, Nate Clifford, the Roddies. You look at Trey McBride, like just all these dudes could not be better human beings themselves. Their family are always really gracious. Torrey Horton, same deal. Some of the sweetest families I've ever met in my entire life. I've got so much love for those guys, and I appreciate them. Got trolled, on that photo. Same dude that's been harassing me for a month now. Shout out to you, man. You got like 6 burners. I'm sure you're tuned in tonight. It really insane that I take up this much real estate for you. But I want to end on a positive note. Shout out Susie Wargen. 30 years of being on local radio for her. I'm so fortunate to know her and have her in my corner. So many Ram legends out there. Her, Jenny Kavnar, Marty Lenz. They've all been great to me over the years, as have Kevin Lytle and Drew Goodman and Terry Fry, the list goes on. But for a CSU legend like Susie Wargen, who I have listened to my entire life, I'm very thankful to have her as a friend, as an advocate, as somebody who I can look up to as a role model. She certainly reps the CSU brand strong, and you love to see that. Let's go into overtime real quick so I can answer some of these questions from the Toyota chat. I love seeing how active it is. Says, anyone besides Vigen, Polasek, or Skipper that have any legit buzz? I don't know how legit the buzz with Skipper actually was. I think some of that was in CSU fans' heads, but based on like one recruit. But I mean, the FCS guys I think are still probably the top most realistic candidates. But again, like some of these hires can come out of total left field, like a D'Anton Lynn, like the USC defensive coordinator or something like that. You never know. I said it earlier, if you missed it on the show, I've been impressed with how tight everything has been kept inside that CSU admin office. I know the fans are frustrated. I know they want the info. And as soon as I can get anything that I trust with any validity, I'm always going to be ethical about this and make sure I really have it before I put it out there. I'll get it to you guys. But it does speak to a healthy and loyal state of the athletic department when you have everybody keeping everything in house, which was just not the case under Parker. I mean, it was a leaky faucet. The other comment says Vigen was spotted flying into Oregon, and Canzano lists Polasek as the favorite for Oregon State. Is the pressure on for CSU to make a decision quickly? I mean, the pressure's on just period because of everything that's going on in this chaotic coaching search. I don't know if the Oregon State situation necessarily puts more pressure on CSU directly. I think those jobs are fairly comparable. My guess is if you polled people nationally, the masses would probably say Oregon State is a little bit more desirable, but I also think that's kind of based on the old regime. And then are they really a better job moving forward? I think that's debatable. But I do think that we're going to get something of a little bit more substance at some point this week, because this is really when it's going to heat up, especially with some of these FCS guys and where they're going. And then obviously that'll have a big impact on what happens with CSU. So thank you guys for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. To brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. We'll be going live Wednesday morning at 11 because of the holidays. We had to adjust the schedule a little bit. Hope to see you there. We'll set the scene for the MTV. Or for the MTE, MTV. And we will we'll preview that Air Force game a little bit as well. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.